Time now for Football at 4. It's powered by the Inside the Birds podcast and brought to you by PlaySugarHouse.com. Sign up now. They'll match your first deposit up to $250 as we take you through what is going on around the Philadelphia Eagles on Football at 4. Rob Maaddi, who covers the Eagles for the Associated Press. Long time he's been around this team, this quarterback, this coach, this organization, and he has a great piece right now around this team that says the troubles of this team, it's not just the coach or the quarterback. Well, Rob, I think a lot of fans out there want to pick one or the other. They want to pick either the coach or the quarterback. It can't be other things that are a problem with this team, can it?
Hey, Mike, what's up, man? Yeah, you know what? It's the easy thing to do, right? It's the most easiest thing to do is to sit back and go, well, get rid of the coach, get rid of the quarterback. And that's all like surface level analysis, but you got to look deeper into it. And it's such a tough thing to do when you analyze or you look at a quarterback and you go, yeah, he's not making throws. He's making bad decisions. His timing looks off. His mechanics look like this. But also any particular play, any particular throw, there's so many components going out there. We don't know the route schemes. We don't know the protections. We don't know what's going on. So there's a lot of issues with this football team. And Mike, I think you got to start at the top with Howie Roseman. I know we've probably beaten this over to death with DK Metcalf over J.J. Arcega-Whiteside and Justin Jefferson being not drafted and taking Jalen Reagor. You look at this team and this offense, if you had Jefferson and DK Metcalf, it's a different story. And that's not to say that Jalen Reagor might not develop. He might, but we know J.J. Arcega-Whiteside isn't going to get the job done at all in an Eagles uniform.
All right, so I have no problem blaming Howie Roseman. Here's the problem I have, though, because I've kind of defended Roseman to some extent and said, do we know that Roseman has autonomy to pick who he wants to pick? Has he run the draft? I feel like a lot of people gave Joe Douglas a lot of credit. Well, the Joe Douglas years, the draft did not yield very much, so we want to blame Roseman for that. But with the picks that we like, we gave Douglas credit. Before that, it was kind of Chip Kelly, and then it was kind of Roseman in the middle there, and then Andy. It seemed like Andy was running the draft. So how much autonomy does Roseman really have on draft day?
That's the million-dollar question. And I don't think anyone really knows fully except Howie and everyone else in that room with them. Because, as you pointed out, that's an excellent defense for Howie Roseman. And then you just look back and go, they won a Super Bowl in 2017. So that's bought him a lot of credibility within the organization. We don't know. You're right. And when you look at Joe Douglas's drafts, he was still here last year in 2019. He didn't take the Jets job until a month or two later. So he still presided over the J.J. Arcega-Whiteside draft. And I don't know which guy was in there beating on the door, banging on the table, saying, I want this guy over that guy. Now, ultimately, Howie's job title, his responsibility as Executive Vice President of Football Operations and a general manager, is that he has final say. How much say or how much input do other guys have? The scouting department, whose advice is he taking when he puts that final decision together? I don't know, but those guys have to be held responsible if they're the ones giving him misinformation or bad information. And, of course, we know drafts are a crapshoot. It's hard to decide, but there's been a lot of misses, and that's why when you look at this team and you go, how are they set up for the future, you don't have a lot of players that you drafted that are going to be playing on rookie contracts that are going to be contributing, starting, and being significant key members of this team. And that's why they're going to be in a cap nightmare next year. And you look at the future and you go, well, there's way more questions right now than they have answers, and that's not a good thing.
Yeah, Rob Maaddi covers the Eagles for the Associated Press. He's been around this team a long time. We'll get into some interesting – yeah, the Roseman stuff. Like, look, I have no problem blaming Roseman if he's the guy. If you said he took J.J., if he's the guy who took Derek Barnett and he traded for – I don't have a problem saying, all right, you were the decision maker. You're at fault because you're right. This team has had a lot of issues on draft day. But I'll ask this question, too, because if you – and I don't know how much stock we put into – the Sporting News or ESPN or NFL.com, when they rank yearly their general managers, and Roseman is constantly in the top 5, it seems that he is well regarded around the league in that role.
He is, and I do a lot of national stuff. I cover the NFL nationally for AP, and when I speak to colleagues or I speak to people around the league, they really do, and this goes back to Andy, they have always held this organization at a higher standard or a higher level and viewed them in a better light than we do locally. And I think part of that has to do also, Mike, consider like relationally, right? Jeffrey Lurie is he's a guy who he's available. He makes himself available to national media. Same with Howie Roseman. Andy Reid always had a good relationship. And sometimes that bias creeps into these rankings and these ratings because, hey, that's a good dude. He's a good guy. He's available. He talks to me. He gives me information. So I'm not saying that's the only criteria, but I know that there's a little bit of bias sometimes into that. And, of course, we always are more critical, and especially in Philadelphia and surrounding areas, over the teams we cover and the teams locally, but we also know more. And that's why sometimes, when you're watching a football game, you're watching an Eagles game, and whoever the analyst is or whoever the play-by-play guy is, and they'll give out some information, and you go, yeah, but that's not I forget who it was earlier this year was saying that which offensive line, Jordan Mailata in training camp, who was struggling. In training camp, he was struggling to the point where I could have never envisioned he would be as productive or somebody who now factors into the future. But someone nationally said Jordan Mailata is having a terrific camp, an excellent camp. And all of us, the local guys, the local beat writers are like, but wait a minute, where are you getting that information from? Because he's had a terrible camp at this point. So I think sometimes you got to take that with a grain of salt. He's done a great job to win a Super Bowl. I'm not going to say, and I'm not ready to fire Howie, and I'm not ready to fire Doug Pederson. I think they've bought themselves with a Super Bowl, with 2 consecutive playoff appearances, and potentially, as ugly as it may be this year, potentially a 3rd division title in 4 years. They've bought themselves an extra year, but Jeffrey Lurie's got to come in and say, hey, we got some issues. We can't allow this to be fool's gold. How do we fix it? Whether it's bringing in an offensive coordinator call plays, bringing in a football guy. We hear that term all the time. Chip Kelly used it to help Howie. Whatever it may be, they can't continue on this path.
When looking at this front office and tying it to Doug Pederson, do you think Doug has a lack of power for being a head coach? You look at Jason Peters and that whole debacle, benching Wentz. Does he have the power to do it? Does he not? The assistant coaches being hired once he said Mike Rowe was going to come back. Do you look at that scenario and feel concerned?
Hunter, I've said this for a while, and I've said it on the air, that I feel Doug Pederson, for a Super Bowl winning coach, does not use that power, that authority, and make demands the way. Now, he doesn't have Bill Belichick's resume. He hasn't won 6 Super Bowls. He can't sit there and tell Howie, I want this, that, and the other. But he's won a Super Bowl. He's earned the right to have more of a say than I believe he does. So when it comes to decisions like this week, Jason Peters and Alshon Jeffrey, there is absolutely no reason why those 2 players should be starting or playing or getting significant snap time. Now, Alshon only had 5 the other day, 5 snaps. One of them he turned into an interception because he missed time to jump. It was almost as if he was sabotaging Carson intentionally on the field as opposed to anonymous sources and other things that we know he's been linked to in the past. Doug Peterson's got to say, John Hightower needs those snaps. He needs those reps. Howie, it was a terrible contract you gave him. You're going to have to bite the bullet. Cut this guy. Addition by subtraction. Jason Peters, the organizational loyalty to Jason Peters is unlike anything I've seen in 21 years covering the AP for the AP. I've never seen anything like it. This guy has so much say, so much power. He dictates which position he plays. He dictates when he wants to practice. He dictates when he comes out of a game. He's got to be benched. He's got to be benched. And that's where Doug Pederson, as you're saying, does not have enough say. And for a guy who's won a Super Bowl, that's astounding to me. It really is.
Rob Maaddi covers the Eagles for the Associated Press. Great stuff as we look at football. For some of the problems this team is going through right now. You know, A lot of people want to say Roseman's the problem, bad drafts. And then, of course, people want to say Doug is the problem, that he is not doing a good enough job with this particular team. I'm kind of in the boat that, look, I think Doug can do a better job with what he's done with Carson. There's no question. I think he can get him rolling out. He can do more stuff to help Carson. But I also feel that if Carson was playing at the level he has played at in his past, that Doug's not looking as – we're not questioning him as much as we are currently. They kind of go hand in hand here, but I think a lot of it stems from the fact that the quarterback is just simply not playing at the level we're used to, so it's making everything look bad.
And you're right. He's got to play better. Carson Wentz has to play better. He knows it. He hasn't. He's been struggling all year long, and I've been called the Carson Wentz apologist to the point where it's getting old. But here's the thing. When you look at Doug Pederson and you look at his play calling ability, I don't think it just started this year, Mike. I don't think this is only this year has been the problem. I think this has been a continual thing. And I was so opposed to putting all the credit on Frank Reich until Nick Foles about a month or so ago comes out, and I know it was a conversation or an interview where he was asked about Frank Reich, but he says he was the guy who unlocked me. And then you start to think, well, Frank Reich really had a lot of influence over Doug Pederson, and the offense clicked like we haven't seen it again since 2017. So since his departure, Doug Peterson's offense has not been anything close to that. So the accumulation of 18, 19, and 20 makes me want to put more of it on Pederson. Now, that's not to absolve Carson at all. He's got to make better decisions. He's got to get rid of the football. He can't play hero football all the time. However, this team isn't built to win with Carson as a game manager. We saw that 2 weeks ago against the Giants. They lost that game. He didn't turn the ball over. He was a game manager. He's not Trent Dilfer with the 2001-2000 Baltimore Ravens. This team isn't good enough. He has to be a gunslinger. He has to play more like Brett Favre than he does anyone else who's a game manager for them to be able to win the game because of what he's got around him, the revolving door at offensive line, the lack of protection, the receivers who continually don't run the right routes, who aren't in the proper place, but they're young, they're learning. These are growing pains that they're going to have to go through, and that's why I've been opposed to any thought or any idea of Carson being benched for Jalen Hurts. You have the luxury this year at 3-6-1 to be in contention. You got to use these final 6 weeks to work things out with your franchise quarterback and still have an opportunity to win a division and allow them to grow with these young receivers, build that chemistry, and see what they can do to turn it around. Now, of course, you go back to Doug, the play calling, not running the ball enough, all that stuff. You got to put that a little bit on him.
Yeah, no doubt. I seem to lean the way that you feel about it. Do you think that Doug should maybe take a step back with play calling, maybe Rich Scangarello being in the mix? The way I brought this up earlier, it's almost like if you continue to go down this road, you're just putting Brandon Workman out on the bump every single game.
It's a great analogy, man. Like Brandon Workman, from the second I saw him throw a hanging curveball, but he's not a closer. But no, you're right, and I don't believe Doug's going to do that on his. He's not going to pull a Matt Nagy, who this couple weeks ago decided, all right, I'm not going to call the plays for the Bears. Didn't work out anyway. They're limited in their offense. Nick Foles is what he is. Somebody's got to step in, and that person's got to be Jeffrey Lurie and say, hey, Doug, you know what? You're a great leader of men. You coach this football team. You have input on what you want offensively. Someone else has to come in here and determine the game plan, help you with the game plan, help you with the play calling, because it is not working out. And we invested so much money into a franchise quarterback. And because of the salary cap and because of dead money, who could they get rid of, right? Who's more expendable? That's the coach. So if the coach is going to want to keep his job, he's got to listen to what the owner tells him to do. And I think it's incumbent upon Jeffrey Lurie to step in and say at some point, and if Doug's not willing to do that now, that's where you pull the reins, man. You give it to Rich Scangarello. They got Marty Mornwig in here. They got Prestel. They got all these offensive minds. But I think there's maybe too many voices in there, and there might be too many voices in Carson's ear, and that might be part of the problem too as well.
Well, it seems that that's a theme in the whole organization, Rob, is that there's too many voices everywhere, too many offensive minds, too many quarterbacks in the room, too many people on draft day, too many people saying, pick this guy, pick that guy, pick this guy, take that guy. It seems that they have a philosophy of more is better.
Yeah, they need to somehow figure out an organizational structure. Like the Sixers finally just got it right. You don't have to look too far for an example. You look across the street. Now you got Daryl Morey in there, and he's got final say. He's making the calls. They got an organizational structure where you got somebody who's held accountable. And sometimes when you have too many voices and you try to appease too many people and you got too many guys pulling you in different directions and there's different agendas and not everyone's on the same page, things like this happen. They got to figure it out because this team is not set up well for the future. And that's a crazy thought when you think in 2017 they won the Super Bowl and they had a young quarterback who 2 years later they give all that money to and they look like they're built for sustained success. It ain't looking that way right now.
Right now, Rob, here's another thing that I don't know that's brought up a whole heck of a lot with what's going on because it's not sexy, but over the Wentz tenure, they have not had a lot of offensive line issues. In fact, they've had one of the more stable and successful offensive lines in the league, but we have plenty of examples around the league of when your line stinks, so too does your team for the most part. How much are the Eagles getting a dose of, hey, have fun with an offensive line problem that we've all gone through? When I say we, I'm talking about Minnesota, the Giants, Seattle. I mean, these teams have all had offensive line issues. The Eagles have not had massive offensive line problems in the Wentz era. They are now having them.
Yeah, you're right. They've had stability. They've had a 3-time Pro Bowl right guard in Brandon Brooks and a 3-time Pro Bowl right tackle and Lane Johnson start every year and a 3-time All-Pro and Jason Kelsey, and they've had that stability. And now this year, 12 different guys have played offensive line, 10 different guys have started, 4 guys who had never started a game in their life before that. So it's such a big factor because you just look at the Browns game and people will go, well, how did he take that safety? Somebody, it's so easy to sit back and take a still shot of the field and go, this guy's open. Well, you don't know what the routes are supposed to be, what the protection scheme's going to be, and the guy's trying to make a play. He took a sack because Jason Peters got beat one more time. This offensive line has been a nightmare, and I think Carson could do this every week. Go out there and pull Tom Brady and just throw the ball in the ground every time. He could go like 2 for 28 every week with 26 incompletions because he threw the ball away because he didn't have enough time. And it's hurting them. And this is a big-time issue for them right now. The good thing is, or the encouraging thing is, the most positive aspect, I think, for this team this year is coming out of it knowing that in Jack Driscoll and in Jordan Mailata, you may have 2 guys who could be pieces for the future on that offensive line. And that's one of the brightest positives that I can look at for this team in 2020.
Thinking about other possible pieces of the future, Travis Fulgham. Now, he started out red hot. It was awesome. It was electric. Last couple of games, not so much. Now, is it ironic that Alshon Jeffrey came back and now this is happening? Well, you look at the snap count, and it wouldn't really say that would be a major issue. What have you seen over the last couple of weeks to show why Travis Fulgham isn't on the stat sheet the same way?
Man, I'm concerned that Travis Fulgham the past 2 weeks has shown you who he is, and that is a 6th-round pick who's been cut 3 times already in a year and a half. I'm really concerned about that because now that teams know his tendencies, now that they've seen him on tape, now that they've seen him on film, to have 2 catches on, I believe it's 12 targets. I might be off by a couple there. He's not making the contested catches that he made earlier this season. Sometimes he's not where he's supposed to be. And my concern is after 4 or 5 games, we were all ready to anoint him wide receiver 1 and a Pro Bowler. And he just might be showing you who he is and why he was picked where he was. Now, and Doug Pederson, to his credit, he usually only is critical of Carson. And I get that because he's the quarterback, he's the veteran, he can handle it, he can take it. Yesterday, he actually said, yeah, I need to see more. He's got to improve. Travis Fulgham needs to get better. He really does. And I think these next 6 games will tell you a lot about Travis Fulgham and his future. And Mike, I'm sure you've heard the Bobby Hoying references, and that's my concern. Is Travis Fulgham's 4 or 5 game stretch like Bobby Hoying was in the late 90s?
Well, it's funny you mentioned Bobby Hoying. I was telling a story that I've been told a bunch of times from people who played with Hoying, and was that when Gruden was here, he would tell Hoying, hey, 3 steps, that guy's going to be open, throw him the ball. Gruden leaves, Dana Bible steps in, that guy's not telling Hoying the same thing, and you find out that you don't really have the quarterback you thought you had, and you wonder if – see, that's the problem. Reich has been gone, and Wentz has still been successful even without Frank being here. Like, his numbers – that's one thing I'm having a big problem with, Rob, is Carson's numbers last year, the year before, and even in the year that he may have won that MVP had he not got hurt, there's been a lot of consistency in his numbers. Only 7 interceptions – the completion percentage way up over, not way up over, but in the 60s. And now all of a sudden, the one constant, Pederson's a constant, Wentz is a constant. The one constant that's different from the 3 previous years is completion percentage and the turnovers. And that's where I'm a little concerned.
Yeah, and I agree wholeheartedly. That's an issue. That's a problem. And what I try to do is go, could a guy who was number 3 in NFL MVP voting in 2017 and came back in 2018 and statistically had a higher passer rating than he did even in 17, and then in 19 he becomes the first quarterback in NFL history with 4,000 yards and no receiver over 500 yards receiving and does all what he did the final 4 games. Could this guy all of a sudden be gone? Could he be lost? Is that Carson Wentz a mirage and this is who he is? And I say no way. So there's got to be a reason. There's got to be an explanation. And it's not that all of a sudden he stinks, but they have to figure it out. They got to figure out what is that problem. So you look at the combination of the revolving door at the offensive line, the young receivers, and here's the key thing. He doesn't have Zach Ertz and Dallas Goedert for a significant chunk this year. And we know Zach Ertz, even when he was playing earlier in the year, wasn't having the type of season we're used to. But Carson and his tight ends, those are his guys. Those are his go-to guys. So all of those factors, add those all up, I think are contributing to what we're seeing now. And it's not this incredible steep decline to where a once promising quarterback is done and finished. It's a bump on the road, and now you have to figure out, okay, how do we get him back there? What do we have to do? We got to surround him with the right talent, and we have to get a play caller in here who gets him, who works with him, who knows what his strengths are and his weaknesses and caters to his strengths. I mean, we talk about this all the time, and you mentioned it earlier, the rollout. Roll the guy out. It works when they roll him out. Why aren't you doing that 7-8 times a game? Why is Baker Mayfield bootlegging and Carson Wentz isn't? What's going on there? I don't understand that. And that's got to be all of these factors. I put them together, Mike, and I go, I can't give up on the kid. I just can't.
Rob Maaddi covers the Eagles and the NFL for the Associated Press. Good stuff here. Check out Rob on Twitter. And, of course, the Eagles season has been a dumpster fire, but that doesn't diminish that Thanksgiving's here, and we want to wish you and your family a happy Thanksgiving, Rob. Thanks for jumping on.
Hey, I appreciate it, guys. You have a great one, man.
You do the same. And he, like August, appeared via the Boardwalk Honda hotline. He pinch hit there on today's Football at 4, which is powered by the Inside the Birds podcast. Drops Wednesday at 6 a.m., Friday, 6 a.m. And, of course, it is brought to you by PlaySugarHouse.com. Sign up now. They'll match your first deposit up to $250. Well, Rob, who's been around the team for a while, still can't tell us who's making these draft picks. I don't think anybody knows the answer to that question.